Hello, my name is Ashley, this is Faithful Rattos, and welcome back. So in today's video, I'm doing a little bit of a Q&A focused on breeding in general and also my rat breeding journey so far. So I hope you learn stuff and I hope that it's interesting. I'm going to start with the general rat breeding questions first, and then I'm going to go on to like the ones that were about me personally. So the first one is, do they not fight during purrings? And Rat Dad's looking at me because I said it weird. With my accent, even the two ways of saying it, pairings and purrings, both of them sound wrong to me and I never know what to say. Do they not fight during pairings? And if they do, what's the solution? So they definitely can and do fight when you are trying to make them up. This can be for a myriad of different reasons. This can be because the doe isn't quite in heat yet. This can be because the doe is frustrated that the buck isn't just quite getting it and she's excited by it. It could also be because she doesn't like that buck. I have seen all of these be true from my own and other people's experiences. Dandy, one of my rats that I've been trying to pair this time around, she actually was quite feisty with BT, the buck I was trying to pair her with the first time. And I think what was her problem was that she wasn't quite fully in heat. Now, Isamu Rats has a video where she's mentioning a pairing that she did, and she tried multiple times and this pair was just not working out. Then she tried a different buck. The doe absolutely went for it with him. And then a couple of days later, the buck that she was trying to use actually came out in an abscess, which kind of says that perhaps that abscess was the problem and she could kind of tell that he wasn't quite the best mate, and that's also perfectly possible. So that all of those situations can be possible. Sometimes it's just as easy as waiting a little bit longer for the doe to be in heat. Sometimes it's changing the buck. Sometimes they're just not in the right environment for this pairing to be very harmonious. They need to have enough room where the doe can run around and be chased, because that's part of their courting behaviours. But they also need not too much space, because that can cause a lot of chasing and frustration, more fights. So a lot of people won't tend to do any bigger than an Alaska, say, for a mating, just to ensure that. Some people will use show tanks or hamster cages, and depending on the method of breeding, whether you're doing a one-night stand or you'll leave them together for longer, that will obviously change. You wouldn't leave them together for longer in a smaller hamster cage. You might do in an Alaska, say, for example. So that's generally some issues you can run into. I've only really had the one where she's not quite in heat yet, but we shall see. We shall see what happens in the future. And it is a really easy fix. You just got to find what works for them. Do you watch the birth? And this is a really interesting one. And I think if you are familiar with breeding of other animals, dogs, cats, horses, it is very normal to have human involvement in the labour and birthing. Now, with rats, we just don't need to do that. And I also think it would stress them out. When it comes to dogs and other animals, you are there during the whelping. You are checking on mum. You are recording which puppy came first, all of that stuff. We don't do it with rats because rats are prey animals and we don't have that thousands of years history with them during birthing. I just don't think it would be beneficial for them. They make their nests, or they start to make their nests, and they birth usually overnight or in the early hours of the morning, and then you can check on them. However, because a lot of rats are nervous, and even as mothers, they're obviously very protective, and because they are prey animals, that's the big thing here, it's just not something that we do. I know a couple of breeders will have a rat cam on the cage to try and watch it. When I say rat cam, I just mean like some sort of security camera just to watch what's going on, and sometimes you can catch births on that. I know of a few breeders who've happened to see births because of that. I haven't, because where my rat cam is and plugs and stuff, and where I have to have the cages, it's just not really that feasible, but it is possible to do. I just don't want to disturb my girls that much, so I haven't done it, and it's not something I recommend, like watching the birth or anything. The next general question is, what does their coat feel like at this stage? And this was when I first asked for questions, and it was on a picture where I'm pretty sure the rats are about 7 days old, 7 or 8 days old. And when they're about 7 or 8 days old, they have the start of fur, and it's like peachy. And what it feels like is kind of like velvet, or if you have a book or a notebook that has the soft touch cover, kind of feels a bit like this, soft. It's not hairy yet and smooth. When they are very young and they just have skin and they have no fur at all, they're quite tacky, especially the first day they're quite sticky. And then obviously it just feels like skin, kind of how like a naked rat would feel. And then on day 7, when they start to get the fuzz, it feels velvety smooth, like soft touch books, or kind of a bit like velvet. And as the days go on, then it gets into regular fur, and then it feels like fur. And the next question that somebody asked is, how is the nursing process, and do they drink milk a lot? So this can actually look very different from doe to doe and day to day, week to week during the nursing period. Some does will spend multiple hours on the nest and then multiple hours off the nest. Some does will spend 20 minutes on, 20 minutes off, 20 minutes on, 20 minutes off. I think this depends on a various number of things. Depends on the doe herself and just her wants. It depends on how big the litter is, on what stage she's on, whether they need feeding more regularly or that they can go a little bit longer. So generally when they're younger, they need to be checked on and fed more often. As they get older, they drink more, but they drink at longer intervals, and the mum can leave them longer as they get older. Now, once they start to leave the nest at about 2 to 3 weeks-ish, so they open their eyes at 2 weeks, and that will then open up the world of sort of just being a thing they want to explore, then that's sort of the time when they start to eat solids themselves and they start to wean off milk. However, they still need milk at that point. It is very much a whatever suits the situation. Lots of does will respond very differently. And the first couple of weeks, they are feeding them in the nest, so you don't see it. I found that when they hit the sort of 2.5, 3 weeks old, and they are getting out of the nest, the mum is going to be more likely to feed them out of the nest. Sometimes the nest sort of naturally breaks down and just becomes a sort of cozy area. Sometimes they just leave the nest completely. I think it depends on the doe and what sort of nest she's built, whether you're using something like an igloo or a Sputnik to sort of create the nest for her. I have given her some options, but she isn't, Lyra, that is, she isn't using them as part of the actual part of her nest. She's actually using a bendy bridge as the entrance to her nest, but it's not the actual nest. So it really depends on the situation. The next question is, do they squeak a lot or are they quiet? So in general, as most rat keepers know, rats are quite quiet pets. They don't bark or weak or anything like that, so they don't usually make vocalizations to us. Generally, the only thing we can hear from them that is not worrying is, well, you get what I'm saying, is squeaking when they're sort of having a disagreement or a fight. Now, baby rats, they do eep when they're born. Usually you will hear them through the nest, eeping and squeaking in those first couple of weeks when they are being cleaned by their mum, because obviously they don't like it. But their mum does have to stimulate them to go to the bathroom, pee and poo. So they squeak that, they squeak when they get cleaned, and they also squeak when she comes into the nest to try and find a nipple when they're sort of fighting each other. And you will find that as they get older, the eeps turn more into squeaks. They also get louder as they get bigger. And also as the nest becomes more open, they get loud, obviously, because the nest isn't blocking them. But yeah, they're generally quite quiet, but you can sometimes hear them eeping and squeaking. I'll try and put in some footage of this happening. I don't think I have it from this time around, but I do have it from last time around. And the last general question that I got is, when do they start exploring, which is something I've kind of touched on already. It does depend on the litter and how developed they are, because just the rates of development can vary quite a bit. Sometimes depending on how big the litter is. If it's a smaller litter, they can develop a little bit quicker. If it's a smaller litter, they also can stay in the nest a little bit longer because they don't feel the rush to try and get food because they're very well fed from their mum, but it's a small litter. So Lyra only has 3 babies. They have started to open their eyes today, which is day 13, so they could theoretically start exploring soon, but I do think that they're not going to be in any sort of rush to sort of explore because they're so well looked after. However, Lyra was breaking the nest at 11 days old, so her babies could be a little early on that, but we haven't seen any of that yet. They're very active when we get them out, but they haven't come out themselves yet. But yeah, it can really depend. It will be after, usually, they open their eyes that they start to explore. It will be generally between that 2 and 3 week mark, though. Okay, on to the questions about me and my breeding. So the first question for me, personally, is why and when did you start breeding? A couple of people asked this. So I have wanted to breed rats for a very long time. We first got our rats in December of 2020, and when I got my first well-bred rats in 2021 in May, that's actually kind of around this time when I got them, 5 years ago now. That's crazy. When I got them, they were a Wheaten, a Siamese, and a Burmese. At that time, I was getting into the sort of rat showing scene, learning a bit more about it, being in Facebook groups and such. And so when I started to be active in the rat fancy at the end of 2021 going into 2022, I did know at that point that I did want to breed rats in the future. It wasn't something that I was financially capable of doing. It also wasn't something that I felt I had enough rat experience to do. Then in the end of 2023, it was sort of becoming a lot more, I was thinking about it a lot more. The start of 2024 is when I really sort of said, yes, this is what I want to do. I want to do this. And so at that point, I started talking to other breeders. I was thinking about which varieties I wanted to breed. I was thinking about which varieties needed more breeders to breed them, which ones were sort of lower in numbers, all of that stuff. And one of the pieces of advice I got was to get some does and have them for their sort of lifespan before. So at that point, I started to build up a doe group. I took in some oldies, I got some babies, and I took in some rescues. And I had this nice little doe group that had a good spread of ages. And for a while, I was just asking around, looking for foundations, once I decided what I was going to breed. And so when I actually got my foundations, that was the start of 2025. And so I had my first litters last year in August and September of 2025. So it really was a slow process. And I would recommend to anybody who wants to get into breeding to take it slow. Don't rush into it. Don't say yes to foundations just because they're ready. Is it the variety that you want to breed? Do they come from a breeder that you want to carry on their lines? Don't just say yes because you can. Say yes because you want to. That's really important. I have seen a lot of people who have gotten very quickly into breeding and then it becomes something that they fall out of love with, which is absolutely fine. I don't think there's anything wrong in that. But I do think taking a little bit more time is also a really valid option. And I'm glad I went that way because I can see this being a more sustainable decision for me rather than something that I sort of was swept into. Yeah, that's when I started breeding. Why? Because I wanted to. I really fell in love with the varieties that I breed when I got those first rats because they were from that same sort of family of varieties and actually are related to all of my rats that I have here from my lines, which is really nice. I really wanted to carry on for posterity. I want there to be very well-bred, temperamentally sound, healthy rats for the future, and I wanted to be a part of that. I also wanted to get more involved in showing and have my own rats that I could show, and that's pretty much why I got into breeding. The second question is, what is my favourite variety? I absolutely love the sea locust varieties, the pointed ones, particularly Burmese, one of my little things, and Russian Burmese. That is my goal. That is where I'm trying to get to. We are quite a ways away from that at the moment because I have sea locust carriers going on here, I have Russian carriers, and I have self carriers. I don't have Burmese, and I definitely don't have Russian Burmese. I have Russian Wheaten, and I have Wheaten, and I have carriers of all the things that I need, but I am slowly going to be trying to get to the Russian Burmese and Burmese. That is my favourite varieties, and I think I just fell in love with those first well-bred rats that I had. They were absolutely wonderful. They were from Brainmaker, and they were just wonderful, wonderful little rats. And I guess like that variety and that like group of varieties just like imprinted on me. So that's my favorite variety. If you were asking about favorite variety outside of what I breed, I would have to say Mark Agouti. Any sort of Mark Agouti. I love Essex, Hooded, Variegated, Capped. Any marked variety in Agouti, I like them too. Rat Dad really likes Hoodeds. So if I were to take on another line, he'd want it to be Hooded, but I am absolutely not ready to take on another line. We just don't have the space or the means to take on another line. Question 2.5, as I've labelled it, is how did you decide which variety you were going to breed? And I think I've sort of covered that. It was the variety that I felt the most drawn to. And I think that is also important, that when you go into rat breeding, that you think about what type of rats you want to breed. Which varieties draw your interest? Which varieties do you think you can stick at? Which sort of temperament and sort of general behaviour in the line do you like? I personally like rats that are active and affectionate. I don't need them to be super cuddly, that is nice, but affectionate and active rats are what I like. And so that is the sort of rat that I was looking for when I went out to find my foundations in that particular family of varieties that I wanted. That is why. That is why I went with what I went with. I kind of feel like I repeated myself a lot in that question. The third question is, what is the like most challenging or the hardest part that you have found so far or in general? So if you were to ask me about rat keeping in general, I would say the week that I had Bordetella and a lot of my rats died, that was the hardest thing I've been through when it comes to rats. When it comes to breeding, so far, don't get me wrong, lots of things can happen. Babies can die, mums can die. You can have a whole load of, particularly to breeding, issues happen. I haven't had that happen, luckily. But for me, it's patience. I am not a patient person, and rat breeding is forcing me to learn to be patient. You have to be patient to see if they end up pregnant, if they'll end up birthing, if they'll birth on the day that you expect them to do. You have to be patient enough to give her time before you can check on them. You have to be patient to wait to see what varieties they are. All of this stuff requires patience. You have to wait until they're of a good age to assess them. That requires patience. All of this, patience, patience, patience. You need patience. And I'm not good at that. But they are teaching me, and I am trying my best. And I think in today's age, we are very much like dopamine hit lucky. We just want that. We just want the dopamine hit. We want something now. We want to order it on Amazon and have it tomorrow. You don't get that when you breed animals. You have to wait. You have to wait to see if they're pregnant. You have to wait to see like all of that stuff. You also have to be quite patient when it comes to the long-term goals, like whether or not you are going to have what you need in the future, all of that stuff. It's just all a patience game, and I'm learning, but I'm not very good at it. The fourth question is, how do you cope with rehoming? And that's a really interesting one, and something that I thought I was going to struggle more with than I did. It was quite emotional the first time that I did do my rehomings and people came to collect them. But what really makes it so easy is, for me, I know I have screened my homes very thoroughly. They have filled out my application form. I have discussed it with them. I have chatted to them for a while. I've gotten to know them. I know more about their sort of rat history and background in general, what the rats they have. They've told me about those rats they have and how much they love them, and we've chatted. And then they come and they get my rats and they are besotted and they fall in love and they're so excited to give them names. And when they get home, they send me pictures and they send me updates and they chat to me about their rats and they message me out of the blue to say just how wonderful they are. And so it's not hard, because I know I've done my best to find homes that will cherish them as much as I would. And I also know that if I kept all of them, I wouldn't be able to carry on breeding, and I wouldn't be able to carry on looking after them to the same level that I look after my rats. All of my rats, even the rats I breed from, are much loved pets, and they are treated like pets, as you can see behind me. And even if they are supposed to be in the breeding program and then they don't end up being in for whatever reason, they still get the same care. I don't just rehome them because I can't use them anymore. So I know that when I rehome rats, it's in their best interest, in my best interest, and in the best interest of those homes. I know that people can lie and I could be tricked, and maybe that will happen in the future. But I know that I've done my best, and so far my interactions with my homes have been amazing. And yeah, it's not hard. Lots of people say when they see the babies, oh, I don't think I could get rid of any of them. And you do feel that in a part of your chest, but it is something that you actually learn to cope with, and it's not a bad, sad thing. It's a happy thing. And I think fosterers as well get this question a lot. How do you not foster fail all of them? Because you wouldn't be able to carry on if you kept them all, because they make that family so happy, and so it's worth it for that discomfort and that missing them for a couple of days, So yeah, I don't find it hard personally at all. I don't know what Rat Dad feels about it or what other people feel, but that's how I feel. Number 5, this is an interesting question. There's some really interesting questions, like personal and general. This question, I don't know if my line is predisposed to small litters. Both of my foundation lines, those breeders never mentioned anything of routinely having small litters. There's a couple of possibilities here. I've only had 3 litters so far, so it's not a lot of data to go on. That being said, 2 of them have been litters of 3, and 1 of them was a litter of 12. So the litter of 12 is quite average, on the higher end of average. 3s are obviously very small. There could be a lot of things at play. It could be the line's fertility. One or the other is quite low. It could be the cross that I've done has a lower level of fertility. It could just be luck. It could just be coincidence at this point. 3 litters isn't a lot of data to go on, so I shall have to wait and see what happens to be able to answer that question with more certainty. I hope it's not, because it doesn't give me many options to pick from to make sure I'm selecting the best from each litters. It causes me a whole load of logistical problems when I have small litters or litters that don't work out. So we will just have to see what happens. I could have that problem. Some lines do. Or it could just be some flukes early on. I don't know at this point. And the last question that I have for this video was somebody asking to see more pictures of the mum, Lyra, being a mum. And I can show you pictures of her. I'll put some up on the screen. And I can show you pictures of the babies. I'll put those up on the screen. What I can't show you right now is pictures of her being a mum, because the babies are still in the nest. I take them out of the nest to check on them, to take pictures of them, to smush them. At that time, she is otherwise occupied. She's either having free roam, eating, or in the cage with her sisters and friends to just have a bit of decompressing time. She is not at the stage yet to where I think she'd be comfortable and happy with me just handling them willy-nilly or taking photos of her. And she is in the nest with them. They haven't left the nest so far, and obviously she's still nursing them inside the nest. So at this point, I don't have any of that. I will share that when that happens. I just don't have it yet. I'm sorry. Okay, that is the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed watching it. Please stick around and subscribe so you can see more videos from me. I talk about my own breeding and keeping journey. I make informational videos and I vlog as well. If you want to see it, stick around and subscribe. You can also become a channel member for varying prices, and you get lots of cool perks. And on the highest tier, you can help me name rats if that's what you want to do. And yeah, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.